Darius, would you like to say something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As might have been reported in various news outlets, I wanted to let members of the STAC know that unfortunately, two members of the CDOT team were tragically killed in a crash that happened in Region 3 yesterday morning. Before we begin, I would like to have a moment of silence to remember for those who we tragically lost yesterday, if we could. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. We're all um, a little disturbed by accidents like this, and hopefully, when we keep working on safety projects and things like that, we can reduce some of the fatalities that we have in the state caused by transportation. Okay, introductions. I'm Vince Rogalski, and I'm chairman of the STAC. And let's start with Dr. Cog.
Greg Mills, Mayor Brighton, and Dr. Cog representative.
Okay,
Ron Kempsdorf, Dr. Cog staff. I think Commissioner Odoricio is here too, Vince.
okay. Central Front Range.
Dick Elsner, Central Front Range, and I believe Dwayne McFall is here also.
Eastern TPR.
Gary Beatty, Eastern.
Grand Valley.
Dana Brose, Grand Valley MPO, and I'm joined by Rachel Peterson.
Okay, and I'm Vince Rogalski, and I'm chairman of the Gunnison Valley Transportation Planning Region. Is there anybody else from my region?
Hey, Vince, Michelle Haynes is on.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, Intermountain.
Hi, I'm Brian Pettit. I'm the chair of the Intermountain Transportation Planning Region.
Okay, North Front Range.
North Front. Hello, Vince. It's Johnny
Hey.
Olson.
Hey, Johnny.
I think we got a couple others on.
Correct. For staff, we've got Paul Sizemore and Becky Carrasco.
Okay, Northwest.
Hi, Vince, Heather Sloop, and Brian Zerkvanik for Northwest TPR.
Okay, Pikes Peak.
Holly Williams, Pikes Peak, and John Leosatos as well.
Pueblo area.
Good morning, Eva Cosleon, and joined by Wendy Pettit.
San Luis Valley.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Vern Hersink, Chair of the San Luis Valley TPR.
South Central.
Metro Wardell, Vice Chair for South Central TPR.
And also Brian Blasey, South Central TPR.
Okay, Southeast. Southeast. Southwest.
Heather Alvarez with the Southwest TPR, and I believe we have Sarah Hill and Shaq Powers on as well.
Thank you. Upper Front Range.
Kevin Ross here with the Upper Front Range.
Okay, Southern Ute. Ute Mountain. FHWA. Okay, FTA. Okay, so we're going to be taking a break between 10:15 and 10:50 so that the CDOT employees can all meet and have a moment to remember our colleagues. So let's go on to approval of the minutes for August meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
Holly
Gary Beatty,
Williams.
I move.
Holly Williams, second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Are there any corrections or additions? Hearing none, are there any people who disagree with approving the minutes of our August meeting? Hearing none, we'll consider the minutes approved. Next item on the agenda is statewide plan PD 14. These have been rearranged because of some other meetings that the people presenters have to go to. So PD 14, Darius.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate moving around the regular schedule of the STAC in order to accommodate us having to leave slightly early so we are able to attend the Upper Front Range TPR meeting later this afternoon. It's greatly appreciated. So today we're having a discussion and potential and requesting potential action for a recommendation from STAC on Policy Directive 14. For the past 5 months, starting in, I believe, about the May timeframe, we have been discussing this with members of STAC and with TC in order to develop a kind of guiding principles and overarching framework for the goals of the next statewide plan and 10-year plan as those are being developed. We are, after having numerous meetings and taking feedback from not only STAC, but other local partners, from members of the TC and from external stakeholders, we believe we have a final draft that's ready for the Commission's consideration in September, and wanted to give you a chance for any comments, questions, and review some of the changes that have happened. Mainly that was about a couple of months ago, but wanted to incorporate those from where we originally started in May. I do also want to note that the policy is designed to be sort of a living document where it is required that reports on progress needs to happen to the Transportation Commission on an annual basis, and that allows for potential adjustments in the goals and objectives in the policy as we implement the 10-year plan and the statewide plan once those are adopted later in August and December of next year. So this won't be even with adoption of this policy, it won't necessarily be locking us in where we're able to make changes as circumstances change and to see where we're at. Next slide, please. This slide allows us to see where Policy Directive 14 and some of the performance objectives live in terms of kind of a hierarchy from strategic investments, strategic plans, and performance measures. So that kind of gives some of clarity on how all of this fits together. Of course, Policy Directive 14 it kind of helps with making investment decisions, primarily with our planning process, but it can help with other programs as well, such as our asset management program and our safety programs, faster safety and HSIP as well. Next slide, please. These are the summary of the changes, and this was presented to the Transportation Commission in August from the original document based off of extensive conversation, which is some of the adjustments that were to the sustainably increased transportation choice goal area, which is over the next 10 years, I shouldn't say 10-year plan, over the next 10 years, once the planning cycle is concluded, to have a goal of 83% increase of transit revenue service miles. include a measure on VNT reduction per capita, annual reduction of 1%, and have a GHG emission reduction for transportation for the entire transportation sector of 60% relative to 2005 levels, to align it with the targets for GHG reductions economy-wide that were set by the legislature both in 2019 and in 2023. Additionally, after hearing feedback, the policy is designed to focus on the top measures statewide, but also knowing that a lot of the other measures, especially for folks that are working through the planning process and working on transportation projects, those provide some value. So we've incorporated as appendices into the policy directive the TC guiding principles that were set up with the last planning cycle in order to help with what the TC will be looking for, and those are aligned well with the goals that are set up in here. The CDOT WIGs, which are the short-term goals, the wildly important goals that are required under what was called the SMART Act, are incorporated into our annual performance plan. And then, of course, a measure matrix with links to publicly available dashboards of every measure that has been in PD 14 currently and in the past, and continue to update that as we go along. So this matrix, in addition to the 7 measures that are in the body of the policy directive, will be reported to the Transportation Commission on an annual basis, usually before the start of the annual budget cycle around the August-September timeframe. Next slide. Won't spend too much time on this slide. This shows the process for evaluation of Policy Directive 14. Again, we're in this purple area of evaluate and reset, refresh, setting department goals, update PD 14 is needed. As I had mentioned previously, this is looked at on an annual basis. The goals are brought forward on here, and it allows the Transportation Commission to make adjustments as needed. Next slide, please. These are the 3 overarching goal areas that are drafted in the policy directive to help guide the development of the statewide plan and the 10-year plan, which include advancing transportation safety, fixing our roads, which includes improving roadway condition and improving bridge condition, and providing more choices that sustainably increase transportation choice, so providing other choices for transportation options that help reduce air pollution from transportation. Next slide. In the advancing transportation safety goal area, there are 2 major, 2 prime measures, which is a 50% reduction in traffic-related fatalities and serious injuries by the end of the 10-year planning horizon, and also includes the same 50% reduction in traffic-related fatalities and serious injuries involving vulnerable road users. Next slide, please. In the Fix Our Roads goal area, 4 measures, 2 related to pavement condition, bringing our interstate pavement condition at or below 1%, which is in line with what we see with other states, but also making sure that we continue to maintain a high and moderate drivability life of 80% on all of our other roadways and state highways throughout the state. On bridge condition, from both the national highway system and the state highway system, ensuring that less than 5% of our bridges are in poor condition. And I see a hand from Gary. Go ahead.
Yeah, back on your safety goals, are
Yes.
those just on state highways, or is that statewide, including city and county streets?
All roads in the state.
Okay. Just a concern on that. A lot of that is on other roads that are not under CDOT control. So it's just a concern when we're setting statewide goals for CDOT facilities and investment, that we're not just looking at CDOT facilities.
It's a good point, Gary. I appreciate that. noted that it is a goal for all roadways, and that's in line with the federal statute and how we have to report. When we report on fatalities, we report it on all roadways, and CDOT is kind of the central repository for all that data once that data comes in. If you look at some of the figures that you would see in the news, or even that's on our website, all of those are for all roads, noting that some of the even though we include a lot of the local roads, it is really a partnership with local governments and our local partners statewide in order to ensure that everybody is able to get the countermeasures needed in order to make our roads safer. And you'll see a lot of that with the development of the statewide highway transportation plan. The conversations with that are ongoing in September. I believe there's going to be an in-person stakeholder session in each of the 5 regions, and a virtual session to get specifically to talk specifically about safety in transportation, whether they travel on our state highways or local roads, and noting that there's some areas where CDOT may not have total control, but there's some areas where CDOT can influence. And of course, we want to make when we're talking with the public, they're taking a look at the transportation system as a whole, and it's a little harder to explain the delineation between what CDOT absolutely controls and not. But I think the bigger point, and not only with safety, but also with some of these other measures, is working collaboratively with our local partners to make sure transportation is safe, effective, and reliable for any mode of travel. So hopefully that helped answer your question, Gary. All right. Can we move on after this slide? Thank you. In the sustainability increased transportation choice, three measures, which include increasing revenue service miles, and that includes all transit agencies in the state. Again, this is one of the ones where it's not directly controlled, but there is influence on there. And with some of the passage of the transit funding bills that happened this last session, that can help with that goal, even though you may not see directly 10-year plan projects on there. The measure I had mentioned with VMT reduction, and of course, reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector relative to what we had in 2005. John.
Thanks, Darius. On the 83%, yes. I think we chatted about it a little bit last meeting. Again, the idea is we're going to do what we can. And again, Dr. Cog has funds for RTD, and we have our own PPRTA that provides funding for transit. So that increase from where we're at now, up an additional 83%, might be a little more expensive than we thought. So as long as I just want to reiterate that hopefully we have some flexibility and some wiggle room on in the big urban areas, that 83 might not necessarily be as cost effective as we think it is, if that makes sense.
That does make sense, John. And I would go back to the beginning of the presentation where I said that this is an annual review and refresh process. So we'll continue to look at implementation of these and how various programs, not just our 10-year plan, but various programs are being done in order to see how these goals are being met, and have those conversations on whether we're making progress over this 10-year time frame or not, or whether we need to make some policy changes or think about these goals. So absolutely, I don't think that it is set in stone, and we're never going to have further conversations of it, but it can be an annual conversation after we set the plans in place and after we see some of the implementation of some of those bills that just recently passed, and some of those funds we may not see immediately, and more to come on that with going out into 26 and 27 when we see some of that stuff, some of those funding come out on the street. Gary.
Yeah, on the VMT reductions, is that a statewide goal?
It is statewide.
Okay.
We would not, we would not have, we would take a look at the statewide VMT versus a statewide population. So it would be a VMT per capita. I think a straight VMT reduction would be difficult with the growth in the state. And also we would want to make sure that we provide flexibility for our regions and have this as a statewide goal.
Yeah, because the rural areas, we have a lot of people travel through, and it would be difficult for us to try to make them bike or things across our region. So thank you.
Absolutely. I think Holly, you were next.
Yes.
Yes. So what I'm seeing here is, things like we're going to increase our statewide transit and we're going to increase our clean transportation. We're going to try and improve our pavement condition, our bridge condition, but I'm not seeing anywhere where it says we're actually going to try to expand some of our roads. So is that actually in a different policy? Because I see some serious needs for some road expansions on I-25 down in Colorado Springs.
Thank you for the question. And the one, we have a 15 or so regions. You'll have to correct me if I'm wrong if I got the count on there. And we're continuing to have those conversations on here. Granted, that's not one of the major goals on here, but that does not mean we aren't going to have conversations on regional levels to determine regional needs. What we're taking a look at is, in general, with the policy, is taking a look at a statewide look and what the future for statewide transportation is, but knowing that there may be specific needs in regional areas that we want to take a look at. One of the items that is not mentioned in these slides, but I do want to bring attention, is the GHG planning standard, which is from our whether it's the MPO's regional transportation plans or CDOT 10-year plan, when those are modeled, that should see a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Granted, it is not everything that you see in the clean transportation. It is a piece of that. So I do want to make that delineation, but those conversations, when we talk about at certain regions, we can happily have those conversations on specific needs as we continue with in particular the TPR meetings, and as the MPOs, which develop their own plans, which are they have per federal statute have more rules and flexibility around that, and then the state helps out with the regions as they identify their priorities. So hopefully that long answer kind of helps answer your question.
Yeah, I'm just kind of seeing if you build it, people are going to ride it. And I'm not seeing any studies that show that that's the case. And so my concern is, after having just spent, another weekend in Utah, 14 lanes on both sides, or 7 lanes on both sides of their major freeway, and seeing this significant willingness to commit dollars into roads as well as buses and rail. I'm just real frustrated that there is not a willingness to commit dollars into road building in here. So, because we Coloradans, we just love our cars. And so that I'd probably be a no vote on this, but just to let you know why.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I also want to mention that in particular, what we had heard in terms of our highway system, that there is a lot of need in maintaining what we currently have, and we want to make that one of the huge focal points of the next planning process, is identifying and where those poor and areas of the system that need maintenance, and being able to identify projects to help identify and get us caught up, working with our regional and local partners as we go through this. I'm sorry, Chair. Commissioner Ross, I believe, was next.
Yeah, thanks, Darius. I guess I had a couple questions. Where are we at? Did we meet our 80% goal prior to this 83% goal that CDOT's throwing out in this PD? And I mean, how are we going to accurately look back and reflect upon the previous policy directives to see if they were achieved and what those measurements are? Because I've actually gone online and I cannot find I guess, the metrics in which to measure previous PDs on. So I'm a little nervous about it. I appreciate Holly's comments because everything I see in this policy directive really feels like it's pointed at transit. And I believe by your answer you just gave, Darius, as far as lane expansion or capacity expansion, it's really not in here, right? And so I have some serious concerns with it because ridership is not there on many of these transit things that we have, and there is still a need. And I do believe, so I guess I'm going to be a little against you here on this, Darius. CDOT knows where the problems are on our existing roadways. I don't think we need to study that. I think we need to effectively start managing it and addressing that. And the dollars from CDOT aren't effectively going there. So where are we at on that 80% that was our previous goal, Darius?
So I'd have to take a look on there. If it's specifically with transit ridership, we'd have to take a look. I can tell you right now with bus gang ridership, that has increased dramatically since the pandemic. And some of our rural transit agencies, I think, have recovered somewhat. I can't speak necessarily on those specifics. I don't have that in front of me. But the items with the link that I put into the chat has all of the performance measure dashboards, which are updated on an annual basis. And these are publicly available for folks to go in and take a look at where those metrics are. And if this is adopted by the TC, of course, we'll make some minor adjustments, but everything that's mentioned in that Appendix A, we will make sure that we have the data to report on it. Appreciate some of the comments on there. And I think I would agree. We do know where some of the poor sections of roadway are, but we also want to make sure that it's a collaborative process with our local partners as far as selecting projects. So we can take a look at the map, and I can show, in fact, we will show where poor sections of roadway are throughout the state. But we also, with the limited amount of funds that we have for everything on here, we want to talk about what those priorities are throughout this planning process in order to help alleviate some of those poor sections of roadway or poor bridges or whatever the issue is, because we do want to give some regional flexibility, knowing that this is taking a look at a statewide level on the future of transportation, but there may be specific regional issues that we'll need to talk about as we develop those regional transportation plans.
Well, honestly, Darius, I think CDOT should, quite frankly, be embarrassed by the condition of their roads. When you look at our neighboring states and the conditions of their roads and their willingness to apply the money where it needs to be to get them repaired, I don't feel that that is a priority of CDOT right now. And you said that, I think, just a moment ago, saying we have to figure out what our priorities are. I don't see that as that's what this CDOT, I don't see that as CDOT's priority right now. And that may just be my perspective, and I apologize. I'm not trying to be rude, but it seems like we have a priority for everything else but the conditions of our roads. And it's frightening, quite honestly.
So one of the things I've maintained over the years is we should not build anything that we can't maintain. And so maintenance is an important issue. So the thing of it is that we can build it, but then it'll just deteriorate if we don't have money to take care of it. Okay, Steve.
Yeah, I appreciate as somebody in the metro area, we appreciate the commitment to increasing some of the support for transit, given the additional mandates from the state. So I think that what I'm trying to find a silver lining on a lot of this, and that's one thing that I see, is that if we're going to create those mandates, that we're going to try to get the support. What I don't want to do is get in a situation where, yeah, we're going to mandate $1 worth of effort and here's a dime, figure out the rest. And I think that's how a lot of local governments feel around the state. And I just want us to be able to try to work in that direction. I also have concerns, as Adams County consistently has presented, yet Dr. Cog, of mandatory reduced VMTs. I think it's fair to say let's do the best we can to get people out of their cars as best as possible. But I'm in a community, and a lot of the folks on this call are in communities where people start their day, they grab their lunch pail, fill it up, and they grab their tool belt and they drive around their communities or their regions in white trucks and help people turning wrenches and swinging hammers and serving a lot of those folks who have the luxury to sit at home ordering their food and all their deliveries. I just want us to make sure that we are not, as we proceed, penalizing the service and the serving community, the givers of our state, who either, pick it, pack it, deliver it, all those folks, the working folks that don't have the luxury of either staying at home or getting on a bus that's a block away from their home and ending that trip a block away from their work. And I think that a lot of times the policies that we make sound great on paper, but then at the end of the day, those disadvantaged communities are quite often left holding more mandates and less support. So I look at this as if we're going to be adding some of these or highlighting some of these additional mandates and requirements that we're going to get support to actually accomplish them. Thank you.
Okay, Johnny.
So I want to echo a lot of what was said, and Commissioner Mauricio is 100% right. Holly, I agree with you that there's not a lot of studies out there that says if you build it, they will come. So I struggle. I've been in transportation for 33 years, and I struggle a little bit that I look at our national averages of our pavement and transportation and where we're at in terms of our condition. And then I look at what we budgeted since 2012, and I think our budget for asset management hasn't changed. It was 728 and 12, and it was 728 this year. So, if that's what we're going to focus on, and we keep pouring money into these other conditions where I think transit and I think reducing VMT, like Commissioner Mauricio said, is important. But we have a bunch of people, we have more people moving in every day that are coming to the trades, to the farming, to the oil and gas fields, whether you like them or not, we have them, to bricks and mortar, and they cannot use these other modes of transportation. They're still on our roads. And even if it's an EV vehicle, the road needs to be in good shape. So I struggle with seeing these conditions go up, these policies go up in these areas when we're really still failing on some of the other areas. And we struggle every day, and we do need capacity. I'm sorry, there's communities that do need capacities. We have 2 interchanges in northern Colorado that have been on the list, and taxpayers have given $30 million to it. Greeley's got 126 million out of the 134, and we're struggling to get any support. We're not asking CDOT for money. We're not asking, we just want to build it, which would reduce VMT. We have transit components. So we are working towards these goals, but then we get blindsided and blocked in other areas. So I struggle with this, and I really think that we're focusing money on things that are important. But if you really ask the people, yeah, we need transit, but I'm going to take my car. That's how it works.
Well, I want to say I appreciate the comments from the STAC members, and as we work to develop those regional plans in the rural areas, and as some of our MPO partners have already developed their own plans, I think what this would be is a starting point and not necessarily the hammer. I think I want to get that to provide that point as a starting point of what we would want to see, and knowing that whatever we put out there, it's going to be a little bit more nuanced when we go from region to region, and there may be specific regional priorities that may rise to the top as we have those conversations and taking a look at projects. And happy to have those conversations as we kind of go through with this. And I think from an overarching statewide perspective is designed to give a vision for this. And as I mentioned previously, this is by no means setting us up where we cannot make any changes over the next 10 years. This allows us as a starting point, and we can make adjustments. Nor does this tie any of our specific it ties our hands in any ways. It's basically to provide those potential guiding principles as we have those conversations on what projects are important throughout different regions and fixing different roadways. I appreciate the comments from everybody on here, and I think there is more to be done. There's stuff that was done in the previous 10-year plan in order to supplement that asset management budget, such as our rural paving program that I believe paved around 500 miles of roads that have been touched in decades, and want to continue to take a look at that and maintain what we already have on here when we're taking a look on our system, when we're taking a look at the next iteration of the statewide plans and the 10-year plan. And also we want to make sure where transit is appropriate, that we take a look at those options and have the appropriate solution for that region. And it's not a one size fit all type of solution. And that's why we'll be having the various meetings with our rural partners throughout this process. And in fact, we'll have one later this afternoon that I'm looking forward to. Heather.
I just want to make sure that I'm hearing what you're saying and that this PD is not going to be drilled down our throats in so many ways of, sorry, it's not hitting these performance measures, so that's not going to happen. Because I think what I'm hearing from the audience is that this turns into a living document. I hear that it's living and breathing, but TC is only going to review it in August of every year. So when we all look at things that we would like to prioritize within our regions and our areas, are we going to be bound to something that is not attainable for any of us in our communities? And realistically, if this doesn't work for our communities, how do we make sure that we're not just bound by this document? And how can we have those, adjustments made prior to next August? Because we're going into a planning year, and I feel as though this is coming to us and it's going to be, this is the new verse, at least for the next 365 days. And you're doing policy decisions with your 20-year plan that is going to be focusing on all of this. And what if it's not a priority for our regions?
It's an interesting perspective that we have on here. And I think while we're taking a look for the policy for the state, the policies for the regions are set in their regional transportation plans. And I would hope that asset management and safety are aligned as much. And I think that I can understand some of the questions folks have on transit and transit and transit needs in one area isn't necessarily the right solution in another area of the state. I can appreciate that, and we would want to have those conversations on what the right solution is for each region, and so that if there is something that is built that is usable by the people in that region. But for the other two goals, I would hope that those align with what we have heard, which is we need to fix what we've already have, and we need to improve safety on our roadways. But and that's kind of why we have this rewrite of this policy directive. If you look at the previous one, it had these same goal areas, but it had a whole mess of other measures, 50 different measures, which made it harder to articulate what we're trying to do with the system. So I think we would probably want to take a look at projects that, let's identify projects that improve roadway condition, identify safety projects. And that may be, well, we need to take a look at shoulders here, or we have a poor section of roadway that hasn't been touched in years, or a bridge that can't adequately move freight. Those are the types of things that we want to bring up and have those conversations on, so we can have that data-driven approach. These are just, I wouldn't say these lock us in for the next 10 years. I want to try to alleviate those fears that you must now, because the state has to increase your revenue service miles by 83%, you have to do that. You and your region have to do that too. By no means are these locking in a specific region-wide target. regional targets. These are statewide targets on what the vision for transportation is and how we will measure ourselves. And as I mentioned previously, we'll take a look at this on an annual basis and see where, at least on an annual basis, and make adjustments as need be. Hopefully that helps answer your question, Heather.
Well, I guess a follow-up to that is, in smaller regions, even if we have a transit agency, then is the majority of our lump spending going to be on transit, or can we still massage, our capacity with our funding and what could potentially be coming down the pike through other funding mechanisms, saying, okay, we get this as a PD, but we need to fix our roads more than we need and get them safe more than we need to increase transit. Or on the converse, if you're in an MPO, we need to increase capacity before we start focusing on this transit money or this transit piece. I guess my concern and what I'm hearing from the audience is, how are we ensured that the transit numbers aren't going to be kind of hitched to every project that we all want or need, and saying, sorry, you're not going to get X dollars, or sorry, this is going to be pushed because we need to increase that transit number before we can fix our roads. And at least that's what I'm hearing. And audience, correct me if I'm wrong with that.
Thank you, Heather, for that. And I can, my apologies, I'm trying to articulate what I want to say on here. Transit is an important component, and I don't think when we're taking a look at projects that if we're resurfacing a rural highway, the project, there would be any scenario where the project would not get funded because it does not have a transit element on there. That just does not make sense. I don't think when we're taking a look at my apologies. There's just a lot of back and forth in here. That would make sense at all. And I don't think that when we're taking a look at projects, does it need to hit all three major goal areas in order to say, yep, that's a good project. We want to have a broad set of potential goals on here, but they aren't necessarily have all of our 10-year plan projects, or even projects that we are that you're developing as part of your rural transportation plans, need to hit all three areas in order to be considered viable. If that is the perception, we want to be able to kind of dispel it. When we take, again, we're taking a look at a 10-year horizon, and we want to take a look at a mix of projects that come back and help us get to these goals as best as possible, and have that flexibility that we can take a look at region specific issues on here as well. So I think the answers aren't quite there yet, and I think it's ongoing conversations that we'll have with at the TPR meetings as we develop this planning process. But if an example is, we won't fund an asset management repaving project because it doesn't have a transit element in it, I don't think that I can guarantee that's not going to happen. In fact, we would want to see those types of projects in order to get our roadways back into the condition that they should be, because unless it's a rail project, any type of transit will probably use that roadway as well. Plus, we need to make sure that our that freight can use those roadways as well, and that they're in good condition in order to get goods and services to our communities. Just one potential example. Commissioner O'Dorisio.
Thanks, Darius. As much as I get sassy about the mandates and stuff, it's just because it's a sensitive nerve that we get at local government after a long time, and I've only been here 10 years. But I will say that I think when I am hearing the comments of some of my colleagues, and I think what we have to ask is just, I think voting yes or no on this policy, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Okay. But what we can do is provide context for you to provide input for the TC and to the administration and leadership about some of the concerns that were raised. And I think it's fair to say, like, if we all agree that we can try to do an and, not an or, then that's one principle or value or an approach that we should all try to aim toward. If we also acknowledge that as we work towards implementation and details, as you said, a lot of this is going to be in the context of regional specific approaches. I also think it's fair to say, like, if you don't get a 1 mile VMT in Washington County or Weld County, but we get two in the metro area that makes up for it. I want to make sure that we have that flexibility to be able to acknowledge that resources and capacity for transit may exist differently, even within regions. Like for us, it would be within DRCOG, even with Adams County. My ability to reduce VMTs on Federal Boulevard are going to be significantly different than out in Strasburg and Watkins. And so I think if we take that approach statewide, then that flexibility might be that we can make it some of these as successful goals as a collective, but that takes us working together as a collective with the different layers of government as well as horizontally among different governments. And so I would just ask that we try to build in as much flexibility as possible to promote that collective effort. And then finally, I also think it would behoove us at some point to really lean in on the like a CDOT DOLA type effort to really hone in on, can we provide a list of resources and and support to local governments, to regions on how to create more revenues where we need to fill it in, because we're not going to fulfill all of our goals with existing revenues. We're not going to be able to do it with property taxes as we continue to find other ways to put caps on them. And I understand those, but like as different powers that be come in and put a little bit of limitations on property tax revenues, that's going to continue to happen. We also have other limitations, and we just don't have enough resources for everyone to accomplish everything. So I would ask that if there's ways for us to try to get more support on providing training and support to local regions on how to explore different revenue sources, whether that's regional transportation authorities or districts or otherwise. I think that will help us try to say, look, there's just simply not enough nickels in this bucket for all of us to get what we want. So let's try to figure out how to expand that bucket. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner, and I appreciate the mentioning about, these are statewide goals and not necessarily goals for one specific region or one area of a region. And it may be that you don't get that in Washington County, but you may be getting it in a certain point of Adams County. I appreciate that, because I think that's the intention, is taking a look at the system as a whole and not being a strict hammer when we on our flexibility. We want to provide flexibility whenever possible. This is, of course, a policy and will help guide, and I think that's the key word, guide the development of the statewide plan process. There are specific mandates that we do have to follow, one being the GHG planning standard and our planning rules under 2 CCR 601-22. However, this is by no means a mandate that is trying to state specifically to each region what specifically need to do there, because we want to maintain flexibility on as much as possible. And maybe in one region it is mainly it's fixing the assets that we have on here, and what the transit needs for rural Colorado are definitely going to be different from what the transit needs are in our MPO areas and our urban core.
Thank you.
All right. Councilman Olson.
So I know we're piling on you, Darius, and I'm sorry. I mean, you're delivering a message that you have to deliver, but we have to remember this policy is going to set the buckets of money. So if we you're right, we're not going to have to go and do a GHG reduction on a pavement project, or we're not going to have to do a reduction of vehicle miles traveled but what this does in the 10-year plan for our reasonably anticipated funds for our areas, it sets the color of money, the buckets of money that we can spend our money on. So as these priorities and these policies go in place, the reason we're so concerned, and I think Heather articulated it very well, is we will have to take this policy, and then the buckets of money that the commission and the DOT puts together will fit this policy. So let's say, hey, we come out with a plan, a 10-year plan, and there's 60% of our money going to transit and 30% going to pavement. I know that's not the case. I'm just throwing that out there. Then we can't really build our plans, our 10-year plans based on our needs. We're building them based on a policy and the financial fiduciary responsibility from the DOT based on the policy. So you are 100% correct. You're not going to force any of those items into those pots of money, but your money and distribution of the money is going to be focused onto these things that we're talking about and taken away from the areas that we need to concentrate on. And our 10-year plan is going to be based on the policy that's set and the dollars that are set for our areas. So I think the concern is yes, we want to, like, let's say, hey, here's North Range, here's your $5 million. You can go spend it on anything you want. That's not the case. Here's your $5 million, but you got to meet these buckets of color of money. That's the concern, that those buckets are going to fill up in the other areas.
Thank you, Johnny. And I think I think where we want to get at is to kind of develop as using this as a framework to help start the conversations more so than stating that it must be X percent to this particular area, X percent to this particular area, X percent to this particular area. As a state, we want to increase revenue service miles for transit. As a state, we want to improve our asset condition and what are the priorities in those particular regions in order to help on there. And we know that it's not going to be a one size fits all. I don't think I can answer specifically and address your concerns necessarily today. But as we go through and develop this, the plans of projects and using the framework that we had last time, we'll be able to come up with where the goal is to come up with a plan to kind of help identify these potential goal areas and report on progress as need be. I'm sounding a little bit like a broken record, but I do want to know that even with the GHG planning standard and some of the other things that happened last time, there was still we had asset management projects that came out on here. Our rural road program was the one, and we had capacity projects in the last 10-year plan. We have Floyd Hill that's going on right now. We have I-25 North, which is adding capacity, and there's of course US 550 and 160 down in Durango. So while these reiterate this, that the policy is designed to guide and not necessarily predetermine the slicing up especially the flexible funds. And also, as I had mentioned, there is other funding that is coming out that was recently passed with Senate Bill 280. I believe it was 24-280. I'm forgetting the other one, which is still in the potential mix. Granted, they are controlled by two enterprises, but those provide other avenues in order to help with some of these overarching transportation goal areas. Because, yeah, this policy is designed to help guide the statewide planning process. But again, it's the 10-year plan and the statewide plan isn't necessarily all of the different programs for transportation that happen statewide. Doesn't include all of the local road programs, doesn't include the grants that come out from CDOT, from the feds. It doesn't include some of our heavily data-driven programs such as the asset management program or such as faster safety. In any case, Commissioner Williams.
Okay, I guess I'm just not seeing the bigger picture here, but I would really, it's a policy directive and not to argue over a word, but it is a directive and it's more than just guidance. I just need to see a fifth category in here that admits the fact that maybe we might get 10,000 more residents down in Colorado Springs, which the internet's saying we did in the past year, that admits that Colorado wants to be a growing state. And that we maybe want to improve our roads, that we don't have to look through a project to find a bridge in bad condition just to expand our freeway and get money from these funds. And that's just my biggest frustration is you're saying, oh, well, if you don't add a bus lane in the middle, then, or don't add a railway track on the side for the high-speed rail, then we're not going to give you any money from these pots of money. And that's what I feel like is happening here is CDOT saying, nope, every single project has to fit in one of these 4 categories, and we are not going to make a 5th category that says, yeah, maybe if you'd get more people here for Space Force, we will support that because Colorado Springs loves its military, and we want to support having more people being able to get to work at Space Force. And that's just the frustration, is it just doesn't seem to realize that maybe Colorado might grow.
Thank you, Commissioner. I apologize. I think we're kind of close to the end of the presentation. The other slides go through the TC guiding principles, which can help with development of our plans. These are familiar from previously, and then some of the other appendices go through some of those other performance measures, which relate back on to highway safety, some of the previous ones that were seen previously, and being able to show where they are. John.
Hey, Darius, sorry to do this to you, but I do have a technical question,
Sure.
believe it or not, that I had beforehand, and I still need to ask it just because I need to sort of do it. If you go back a couple of slides where it says 1% in poor condition, this, no, was
Yes.
that one. Interstate pavement in poor condition at or below 1%. And I just need to, and again, this is more of a technical question. I'm trying to relate that back into the way pavement preservation has been explained to me over the years. So, because again, you only want to touch pavements, and again, it's different depending on the type of pavement and the weather, right? But every 20 years is sort of the rule of thumb that I was given. And so is this saying that you're still going to touch it only 20 years, but you're going to make sure you're doing it? Or are you going to be doing it more often?
It's an interesting question. I don't think the measure itself gets to that particular piece of that. I think that gets into a little bit more complicated aspects of asset preservation and keeping it in basically keeping it in a good condition. When we're talking about the poor condition, these are based off of the standards that are set by I think it was set back in it was map 21 that set those on here.
Right. Okay.
It's taken a look at trying to reduce that 1% poor, or excuse me, that percent of interstate in the poor condition, because those are the poorest of the poor roadways. So we could have that conversation, John, if you would like to kind of go through that. But I think what you had asked goes beyond there on how we can keep some of the roadways that are already in good condition without them falling into fair or poor. The reason we have interstate broken out here is because we lose flexibility on a large portion of our flexible funds if the state goes over 5% poor on the interstates.
Okay. So, and I think you actually did answer my question. So if I have 100 houses, I want to make sure that only one of them needs painting, right? That's less than 1% needs that maintenance. And so the way you answered the question is perfect, because you're not saying that you're going to make sure that every house is pristine and at 100%, paint. You're only making sure that in the total, only 1%. So you explained it in terms that I can relate back to what I've been told, and that makes sense. My concern was we were going to maintain the roads in a higher condition. I shouldn't say higher condition, but we were going to sort of go above and beyond the sort of reasonably expected maintenance for basically a return on investment. But that's not what this is saying. This is just saying overall, we'll still treat each one individually, and that in the totality, all of the systems are going to be up to date. So I think it's good, and it fits perfectly in with what everyone's been saying here. I just needed to get it back. So thank you for answering my question.
Absolutely. Gary.
Yeah, on the pavement condition for interstates, first, how did you come to the 1%? I think currently we're around 3% and worried about hitting the 5%. And just knowing the funding streams that are available, it's kind of a concern that the interstates could eat up all the money for reconstruction and things to try to get down to 1%. Knowing the age of many of the state interstates, Glenwood Canyon out here east of Denver on I-70 and I-76, the amount of aged concrete that's going to be starting to be scheduled to be replaced within the next 10 years, getting down to 1% seems almost too ambitious if these are going to be guiding principles for setting budget allocations. I would love to get down to 1%. And I think everybody on here would love to do that and meet the 80%, but we have to also be realistic about the funding streams that are available to meet these goals. And that 1% seems actually very low. It would move us up on the state or on the national ranking on interstates if we could get there. But the concern is it would take funding away from other areas that we also need to address to get clear down to 1%.
And I appreciate the comments. I think it is one of the areas that we'll kind of have to continually watch, because we're not just taking a look at, all right, we fixed the 1% weight and we did it. We're in great condition. But as you articulated, Gary, there is pavement that's as it continues to age, it can rapidly deteriorate. Not rapidly, it can deteriorate over time, and how can and it is a good concern on here, and we want to, how we got to the 1% is most states are at or below that 1% threshold. And so this is to bring us in line with most of the other states around the country, and gives a lot of flexibility in terms of some of that aging infrastructure that you had pointed out. But that also gets back into why we also included the drivability life metric, 80% higher and moderate, because we do not want to ignore the rest of the system at the expense of the interstates. Even though the interstates are probably one of our most important roads, they carry most of our freight, the tourism that comes in here, people use it for commuting, so on and so forth. So it is a little bit of a balancing act in order to get a right mix of projects, and we'll start off that conversation because I will be out there on Monday for the Eastern TPR meeting, and we'll have those conversations statewide.
Okay, go ahead. Anything else, Darius?
I do not have anything else, unless there's any questions on the final slides, which are already in the packet as well, with the full list of the PD. But this is going to the Transportation Commission in September. And of course, as STAC is the advisory board, looking at a potential recommendation from the board to the TC on this potential item before we move on to the next one. And I see Heather has a question, so my apologies.
That's okay, Darius. Actually, I was going to ask, I know you just actually answered my question. You're looking for a recommendation. I would suggest, and the group can agree or disagree, but that the comments from this discussion be incorporated in the information that's presented next in September for consideration. Because I think that all of these comments are extremely valid. And it's kind of a short timeline. If we had more time, I was actually going to ask if we could incorporate all of these comments and then bring it back to STAC for a vote. But if we don't have that time, I would ask that at least these comments be incorporated when you are making the presentation for approval.
Yes, happy to do so.
Gary?
Yeah, question on the wigs that are incorporated and apparently by statute. I didn't realize those were even statutorily required to be included. I mean, everybody agrees that those are good goals in general, but they don't feel like they're a grassroots priority from the people of the state. After comments today, most everybody wants system preservation and system quality to be improved with the aging of our system as top priority, and then incorporate these other pieces as they can fit. And through the presentation, it just looked like the wigs were kind of being elevated above all the public input and the public wishes for system preservation and improvement to be top priority, when the wigs are safety, which most everybody agrees with, and then the transit pieces. Just wondering how we incorporate this, but still have this be a document of the people of the state and what they're wishing to have done through CDOT for the system.
Thank you. Think of I apologize if I misspoke. The WIGs are what goes into the annual performance plan, which is supposed to be an annual look at wildly, and what's the best way to put it? Ambitious goals, and that can happen in a 1 year time frame, and that's kind of why you're not seeing system performance in that, because it oftentimes, and for system preservation, the lever you need in order to move that is specific projects, and usually are specific projects to address the issue, and usually you aren't able to see that in that time frame. This was included to show the full spectrum of major performance efforts in the department, knowing that that is more of an internal, departmental strategic 1 year strategic plan on ambitious goals and on ambitious strategies in order to achieve ambitious goals. If that makes sense. Does that help a little bit, Gary, to kind of explain that a little bit? And by no means is it intended to elevate above system preservation, and that's why it's in the appendix and not specifically mentioned in the body of the policy directive.
Okay, thank you.
So where did this take us, Darius?
I'm happy to answer any other questions and appreciate the comments and the conversations as we go through this, but also would like to ask a potential recommendation either way of STAC, knowing that we've been chatting on this for the past few months, and wanted to provide that to the Transportation Commission when it's up for a vote. So I guess Chair is asking for a potential recommendation either way from members of the STAC.
Okay, so is there anybody willing to put forth a motion? Well, it doesn't look like anybody's ready to put forth a recommendation.
Does anyone have, well, Johnny, you go. You might have a reasonable motion.
I don't know if anything I do is reasonable, Holly. I think people on the call would agree with that. I would move that we take a position of amend with the comments that we've all had. I think it's hard for us to support, and Commissioner Odoricio was 100% correct. It's going to pass no matter what we say. We just want to be heard. We want to be understood. So I'm trying to figure out how to make that motion that I move to accept it with amendments from the comments from the STAC, and as long as our comments are articulated at commission, that's what I would make a motion to do. I just don't know how to do that.
So basically what you're saying is we're not willing to accept the PD 14 as is.
Right.
Is there a second to that?
Mr. Chair, if I could articulate, and Johnny, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I know you have done that in the past as on there, but basically to accept the PD or is to take a position of amend and to ensure that when this is presented to the commission at the commission meeting on the 17th, to incorporate a summary of the comments that were made here to make sure that those are included included in the body of the document on any potential action. Does that help?
Yes. Thank you. I'm not gonna change your mind.
All right.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Are there further discussion?
Commissioner O'Dorisio has his hand up.
Go ahead.
So, you have to. I appreciate your guys' patience as this is my first year with the STAC, and I don't know the protocols, but maybe is it something where, is it only maybe we have some folks that participate in STAC that could participate also in that discussion or the presentation to explain what some of the comments were. It might help provide some context or some perspective, if you think that's effective and helpful. And the reason I say that is, I mean, the process that we have here is we take a pound of flesh from Darius and he goes to the Transportation Commission and shows where we sliced it all off. I know he'll be able to deliver a lot of our concerns, but I also think it's most effective if folks are able to hear it from us. And not, there's enough concerns, at least for us to be able to say, look, we understand where this is going. Here's some of the comments that came up or themes, and maybe Darius and team can provide kind of what their summary was based on their notes. And then we have maybe a few folks from STAC be able to be there, even if they're just in the audience. I mean, sometimes the presence there helps. And I want to thank Darius for his work on this, because I know you come here, pound of flesh, and then you have to I know it's hard to do what you're doing.
Darius is doing a great job, and I agree with you, Commissioner.
Okay, so one of the problems is they're only going to be doing a commission meeting on Wednesday for 2 hours in the morning, and then they're going on a bus tour. So
if I could, Mr. Chair, I can kind of help to answer the question. I think Commissioner O'Dorisio, you and any member of the public is available to give public comment, whether it's through the Zoom platform or in person. This particular meeting, the commission will be in Grand Junction, so I think a lot of the stuff will be in Zoom, or you're able to give written comment as well and provide that to the commission liaison as well, and that can be provided. Additionally, I am happy to create a summary. I can work with the chair and vice chair to make sure that we capture that accurately, and we will present that when we take this up for the review of the resolution. And hopefully, I articulated that well, Vice Chair Adams.
Darius, I do have a question going to what people are asking, and that is, typically the process is that Vince gives the update and then we kind of disappear. And I guess my question after Johnny's motion is, would there be some runway for Vince, myself, or anyone else from STAC that we can nominate to be the spokesperson for this specific topic when it is brought up, and not just have it be during our STAC update, and have it be more head-on specific for that topic, because we don't really get that opportunity when TC is going. And I think what you're hearing from STAC is that they would like to be heard during this specific topic being discussed at TC.
So not, excuse me. So not just reporting to the
Right.
see,
But actually
to,
making the statement during
to
this.
interact with them.
Yes.
The discussion of where we're going with this.
Yeah, I think that's where Johnny's headed with this as well.
Vince, may I make a comment, please?
Go ahead.
This is Eula Adams, and I am the vice chair of CDOT. And I think one of the reasons I like to sit in on this call is so that I can hear firsthand some of the concerns. And we do understand that there were, and we've been purposely waiting to vote on this matter until after we heard from STAC. So there's a lot of interest in getting your view and understanding what your views are. But I think that as Vince and as Darius have both mentioned, the meeting coming up, it will be a shorter meeting than normal because we're going to be in Grand Junction. But I think the standard process is for public comments, and I think Darius was suggesting that that's probably the forum, and it can be as many of you as like to make those public comments. That's certainly available to anyone that would like to make it. I think that's the appropriate place for you to make your voices heard and your opinions known. And I think the idea of maybe editing the statement with your amendments is also something that's probably acceptable too. But I think that Vince and Darius have probably outlined the best ways for you to make sure that your opinions are heard.
Is this going to be workshopped on Wednesday? Because that seems actually the time that some comments might be appropriate.
I don't think we have it on the agenda. Gary, I don't think we have it on the agenda to be workshopped on Wednesday because this matter, we have workshopped it probably at length, but given some of the concerns, I mean, I guess Darius, I don't know if you're personally planning on being there on, for the workshop. I don't think you were from our preliminary discussion about this, but I do think that if, given some of the comments that I've heard, I don't think it would be inappropriate for us to put it back to the team and see if we can't slot some time in there for it to be worked, Gary. But I'm curious, are you suggesting that that would be a time for someone to speak to this?
I was just trying to figure out a time that could actually get some changes incorporated. And once it's to a vote, it's difficult to make changes to a document like that. So just
I think in fairness, I think one of the reasons that we've really taken as long as we have taken to kind of work this. I mean, I do think we have been talking about this for quite some time. So it's not as though we've just really brought this up. So some of the issues I think have been out there. And we do appreciate some of the concerns raised from all the people on this call. So I don't think that I think that's one of the reasons that there is no plan for it to be workshopped, to my recollection, to any extensive degree, because we assume that this meeting with STAC would be the meeting where your views would be shared in this kind of last bite at the apple, so to speak, and that whatever concerns you had could be brought back to the commission as that final look at it. So I do think, depending on the seriousness and the nature of it, it might be that we might be able to defer it, but I don't think that's the plan. The plan was hopefully this would be the last look and that we would have a final opportunity to vote on it at the commission meeting on the, I think it's really on the 19th, unless I'm mistaken.
Yes, we've been workshopping this both at STAC and at the commission since May in order to provide that comment. But I do also want to note that even when the vote's taken on the resolution, the commission has the authority to make amendments to their resolution and to their documents as needed on here. But going back to what the presentation on there, I think as Vice Chair Adams has mentioned, the meeting will have appropriate time for public comment in order to provide specifics on there, and happy to bring forward, reiterate those when we bring forward the item to the commission for adoption. And of course, the commission can take whatever action they like, whether it's amend, adopt, reject, or defer.
So if we defer it, that would be an opportunity for both the STAC and the commission to get together and actually discuss it.
I hate to put too much on here, Chair, but like I said, we've been having the discussion since May, and we're already getting fairly close into or not fairly close. We've been going forward and with the planning process, and previous years, it's been helpful to have this relatively soon before the plans are adopted. So a deferral is, of course, up to the commission to do on here, but we have been delayed for quite a bit so far on this potential topic. So hate to put a rush on everything, but just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, but in our discussions, it's the STAC that's discussing it, and then the commission discusses it, but we're not discussing it together. So there would be a most appropriate to come together so that we have the same mind amongst both of us. Yes, I know it's difficult.
Vince, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Heather.
I guess my concern, Johnny, I appreciate you aiming for a motion. I am going to vote no on this motion because I think our motion should be to defer. And I believe that the motion should be defer so that we could have a joint meeting. I mean, that is not impossible. And I think the fact that this next meeting for TC is rushed and very short because of their tour, it's really kind of making, I guess, forcing us into a situation where STAC isn't comfortable. We would like some amendments. How is that going to be communicated? And I think the bottom line is I would rather us have that either joint session or have the capacity for everyone to be at least on a page where we can inform an amendment to this process than just try to hope for the best and know that this is going to be accepted. I understand there's time frames here, but as I was saying before, the concern is this turns into how we're focusing on our planning documents. And this is the concern that we're all feeling, is this turns into what we're doing for the next 20 years, not just this year.
I guess one observation I'd make is it might be helpful to really get a clear understanding of exactly what all the objections are. I've been listening to the calls, and this is not just my first one. So, and this is not, in my opinion, the first time this has really been brought to the STAC. So I guess I'd really like to understand, what are the 6, 7 things that are kind of really concerning. I heard some of the concerns today, but I'd like to, if I could see them maybe, before we get to the meeting on the 18th, if I could see them kind of listed out so that I could then have an understanding of what the STAC positions are around those, maybe we could figure out how far apart we really are with respect to what we want to do versus what you think is possible. Maybe that could help us avoid another, my concern is, to be very candid with you, Heather, is that once we get into the discussion of having another meeting, it could potentially turn into another 4 or 5 months of going back and forth on this. So I really would I think we would all like to put this one to bed, given the time that's been invested in it. So maybe we could try, if as Darius suggested, maybe summarizing what the differences, what the opinions are. I won't call them differences. What the opinions of STAC are about Policy Directive 14. Give us a chance to take a look or give the staff a chance to take a look. And maybe there's a way to get there so that we could still close this matter out satisfactorily. Or maybe it would be persuasive in terms of maybe deferral in some way, because it would be clear to all of us as CDOT commissioners that we have a big gap here.
Can I move to rescind my motion?
That's a possibility.
I would move to rescind my motion of amend with comments.
Okay, is the second in concurrence with that?
Yes.
Okay. The motion is rescinded, so then it's no longer on the floor. Gary.
Yeah, I think part of the issue has been that these comments have been made from the beginning of the discussion with the changes to PD 14, and it feels like there haven't been changes incorporated from the STAC and even commission to some extent, because I've heard comments from them that they're concerned about removing so many of the asset management criterias and things from the matrix. And it just seems like no matter who's making the comments, that they're just not getting incorporated into the document. And that seems to be different from past times going through this process. Many times those things were incorporated as they were brought up by the STAC and the commission. And this time it seems to be those are not getting incorporated. And I think that's driving a lot of this uneasiness of the STAC members at this point, is things just are not getting incorporated into the new PD 14.
So one
to
of the
show our concern about the quality of the assets and preservation and possible needs for some capacity improvements has been brought up. Some of these other things that we think should still be in there. So
Gary, can I speak to your comment though, Gary? I think from my perspective, and I can only speak for me, I think when we've had these discussions with Darius and his team, I think we've understood that we were not eliminating things from the policy directive. We were kind of streamlining the process. And we've raised the concern in the commission meetings and workshops that I've been in, the very same concern about things not appearing in as specifically as they once were. But that didn't mean, as I've understood some of the feedback from Darius and from the CDOT team, didn't mean that they were disappearing and that they were going away. It just simply meant that they were being kind of lowered, but it certainly didn't mean a reduction or diminishment in our concerns about asset management or the other concerns. So I'd love for Darius to speak more to that, but I know we've talked about these things in terms of what was in the mix before, but those things not disappearing. But
I thank you, Vice Chair Adams, and I want to reiterate that those comments have been taken into heart, and in the packet you'll see Appendix A includes all of the asset management metrics that were previously in there and will be in the Appendix A of the PD for reference, knowing that when we take a look at our larger planning projects, we may not necessarily take a look at walls condition or signals condition, but knowing that they're still important. So some of those comments have been taken into heart and are in the latest version of the document. Now, as far as the concern about capacity projects, I think that's some comment that we'll be happy to relate to the TC for consideration. But I do want to note that those comments have been incorporated from where we started back in May.
So it's one of the things that Darius has been clear on is all the things that PD 14 was in the past. Most of those things have been put back to an appendices. So it's still part of the document, but it's not right up front in your face. You have to look for it. Okay, Steve.
Yeah, I'm only fairly new to the STAC here, but I've been engaged in the transportation issues for quite a while in my role at Adams County. I will just say, looking at and listening to the comments, I think it's fair to say that what I'm seeing here is attention from folks on the STAC who don't feel like they're being heard. or not having a meaningful level of participation, that when they don't see a lot of the comments turning into changes in the drafts or in some of the policies. I think that we also need to have a reality check ourselves as what is not just the official role of the STAC, but also what is our persuasive standing? Like what kind of influence do we actually have? And it seems to be limited, and we can push back and we can say no, don't do it. But the reality that I'm reading when I look at kind of reading the collective room across the state is this is going to be passed. And if we want to have influence, the goal of the members of the STAC who have concerns about individual elements of the policy or approach, we could try to let's constructively try to identify ways to move the needle in the direction we think is more inclusive and meaningful. But I don't think just saying no is going to get us anywhere. If anything, it might continue to sideline us. Now, I'm not saying you don't stand tall when there's issues of principle and value that we have to, but I think what I'm hearing is that there are some general commonalities where systemically, I'm hearing that folks on the STAC don't feel like that the role of the STAC, the influence of the STAC is meeting the official, the stated role of what the STAC should be, is more of an advisory group that the Transportation Commission takes into account. That, just like all of us who are elected officials, there are times where we say, yes, you've been heard, we're just not going to agree with you. And that's probably what's happening at the Transportation Commission and at the with the state administration. And so in those situations, the best thing that we can do is identify where we can try to find different elements to make the policy or the implementation of the policy better in line with what we want, because I don't think that we're going to get what a lot of folks want simply by just saying, no, we don't like it. And so that's just my perspective. Everyone can have a different perspective on that. But I guess what I would say is there's substantive issues that we may have with the policy. And one of those will be vehicle miles traveled when you have just a flat cut that has required every year. My concern that I expressed earlier is that should be spread out, and the confirmation I got from Darius and everyone is it is. I also think that when you say 1% cut across the board, at some point you get to the meat. If I say I'm going to lose weight at a certain level every year, that's great. But then at some point you start having to cut into the meat. And I don't have that problem yet, but it would be nice to get there. But the point would be is those mandatory cuts of 1% need to be temporary, or at least get to the point where we can implement them and they don't go. I think I heard other issues about the distribution or the increase of from 80 to 83. And I heard concerns about transit. I heard concerns about regional approach versus statewide mandates. Let's give Commissioner Adams some of the talking points. Let's give Darius those talking points to deliver. But I think for us standing tall and beating our chest is not going to get us any more influence. If anything, it might get us less. So I'm just asking the board to the folks on the STAC to weigh in on how do we think we can actually make the process, the outcomes better based on what we want to see. And separate from substantively, if we have concerns about the overall procedural or systemic issues of the STAC, maybe not feeling heard or participated or engaged, then that is a separate concern that we could express if that's what the folks are wanting to say. Sorry for the long-winded way of saying let's get back on track and figure out how to do this productively.
From my experience in working with the commission has always listened to us and have made some changes as a result of that. And so I found them very cooperative. And so the thing of it is how do we do the same thing with this particular item in the time that we have? How do we get to an agreement to move forward? Okay, Darius, we have a break coming up. How do you want to do the break? You want us to keep signed on?
I think Aaron can put on, folks can sign on but step away. I know it's going to be a long break, so feel free to log off and then log back on. But we'll be back on at about 10:50. If I can make this recommendation with the 5 minutes that we have left in regards to this particular issue, perhaps having a conversation a little bit later before TC materials are due with the chair and vice chair to kind of move forward in order to make sure that the concerns of the STAC are relayed to the TC properly. And I'm happy to do that after this meeting.
Yeah, and one of the things I was going to request from you is a note or notes on all the stuff we've discussed, what we thought was good, what we thought was bad, because my memory doesn't remember all of those things. So I have to have some reference.
Well, Mr. Chair, it's a good thing that the meeting's recorded so we can go back and see it all.
Good, good.
I don't like the sound of my voice, so it'll be a little bit painful, but happy to do so.
No, that's all right. Okay. Any other things you want to bring before we got about 9 minutes left before we
Don't we need to make a motion of some sort for this? This is an action item, so we need to do something. We can't just leave it dead.
Yeah, and I think there's a motion and a second on the floor, Vince.
No, it's been rescinded.
I thought it was amended.
No, it was not. So we don't have a motion on the floor. The thing of it is we got a real tight crunch right now on time. So we could bring this up again when we get together here after this particular break.
Oh, Vince, this is Johnny.
Okay, Johnny.
I'm really, Commissioner Odoricio makes excellent points. It's not going to change. If we belabor it anymore, you're going to get mad because your agenda's busted. I like your idea that Darius takes back our comments with Commissioner Eulis, and that is delivered. I am sensing a reject on this as written. So really, I made a motion to amend, but I probably should have made a motion to reject with this on it. But if we make a motion to reject, we sort of go against Steve, which I agree with. It doesn't really matter what we do, and does it really put anything on the table other than let them know that we're not happy with the PD, and then have Darius tell them why we're not happy with the PD. So I'm going to make a motion to reject with Darius and Commissioner Eulis articulating our concerns. That's my motion.
So what you're really saying is what I said before. The STAC is not willing to accept PD 14 as written.
Yep.
Okay.
Reject as written.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
It's Commissioner Kevin Ross, I'd second.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor. Do we want to have any more discussion or do we want to vote? Okay. Go ahead, Holly. Did you have something?
Yes, I'm wondering if we did an amendment to the policy directive that brought out of the appendix the information on reducing congestion.
Well, I think, yeah,
I think fifth goal.
Yeah,
reduce congestion.
I think there's more to it than just that. And so,
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, Holly, Commissioner Williams, I didn't mean to interrupt. We are kind of at time. I'm happy to continue the conversation afterwards, but we do need to have our break right now.
Right.
I would say let's have a vote then.
Okay. And so since there's so many people on the Zoom, it's difficult to do that, but let me put it this way. So Johnny's got a motion that we're not willing to accept the PD 14 as written. Is that okay, Johnny?
Yes, with Commissioner Eulis and Darius articulating our concerns.
Okay, well, I will also be doing that. So are there any people who disagree with that? Hearing none, we'll consider
No.
that.
No, Steve.
Sorry, I raised my
There's
hand, Vince.
one.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm voting against the rejection for the reasons I stated earlier.
Okay, is there anybody else? Considering that we have one objection to the motion is going to be carried. Thanks. And we'll be back at 10:50. Is that what right, Darius?
Correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, everybody. That was a really wild discussion. And so some of those discussions, I'd really have a long, full day agenda to do that. But since we have short time, we'll kind of pack it all in. So I'll see you again back at 10:50. 10:50. Well, we got a couple minutes yet. Okay, okay, it's time to get back together. One of the things that we need to discuss and vote on is the bylaws for the State Transportation Advisory Committee. One of the reasons we're trying to get this done today is because our next meeting in October is going to be an in-person meeting, and we're going to be voting on officers for the STAC. So we'd like to get this in the books before that. So, Darius.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was discussed at the STAC meeting previously, and there have been some updates based on those comments. The changes you'll see in red and blue on the bylaws, and I'm going to go through them fairly briefly, and then they open for comments and potential adoption if STAC agrees with the bylaw changes. So starting off with Article 3, Section 4, just some cleanup of some language in regards to notification when there is a change in STAC representation. Moving on to Section 5 of that article. This includes the requirement that the chairperson of the Transit and Rail Advisory Committee, otherwise known as TRAC, will be a non-voting member of STAC and be entitled to an alternate representative as well if they're unable to attend, and they shall notify the DTD division director in writing at the time of that appointment. Moving on to Article 4, Section 2. The main change here, as came from the study from House Bill 1101 and from the resolution passed by the Transportation Commission, is that the chairperson of the STAC shall be a member of STAC and shall hold office for no more than two-year terms. The Section 3 includes that same provision for the vice chair, and that a single person may serve as both chairperson and vice chairperson for a total of up to 4 two-year terms. And in the absence of both the chairperson and the vice chairperson, the members at the meeting of the STAC shall select a chair pro tem to preside over the meeting if both are absent. Moving on to Section 6, this section, starting in 2026, will move the elections to the in-person meeting in May, and that is to help with the budgeting process. If you remember, back in May of this year, the STAC approved a funding allocation for the Rural TPR Grant Program, and this helps with allocating of those funds and avoids additional procurement and administrative burden in order to get those funds out to the TPRs as soon as possible. So there will be an election in October of this year, and then going forward in future years, they will be moved to May. Section 11. Excuse me. Section 11 is to ensure that the STAC's leadership represents both rural and urban Colorado. The Whenever possible, the chairperson and the vice chair will alternate between a rural TPR or tribe or and a representative from an MPO area. We had noted we wanted to make it clear that these should switch afterwards and to encourage equal distribution whenever available, knowing that sometimes there may not be availability on those particular to have a strict interpretation or strict rotation of that, but to encourage that whenever possible so all voices are heard. And those are the changes to the bylaws that were discussed. Happy to answer any questions from members of STAC, and I believe Gary, you're up first.
Yeah, on the one where it was no more than 4 terms.
Yes.
I thought we had discussed that being consecutive ones, that they would at least have to have a break in there before they could be possibly reelected. I don't see that probably being an issue, but I hate to limit a representative body of not allowing somebody to come back and hold a position if they'd been gone for a while and they were comfortable reelecting them. Because the way it's worded now, it would be limited. Nobody could serve more than 4 terms ever.
Correct. You're correct on that, Gary. It was the requirement under the rule and under the TC resolution is that they shall serve no more than 2 consecutive terms or 4 consecutive terms from either the vice chair or the chair position. That is the requirement that has to be put into the bylaws. However, discussion previously, what staff had gotten was that is to be more stringent and eliminate the consecutive piece from that. However, STAC can choose to add that consecutive language in if they so choose to.
Other questions? Comment? Are we ready to have a motion to approve?
I would move to approve with adding the shall not be consecutive for more than 4 terms.
Okay, is there a second?
Second from Motoricio.
Thanks, Steve. Any other comments? Further discussion? Is there anybody that disagrees with voting yes on this motion? Bylaws are approved.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mr. Chair.
Okay, so now
can we get a corrected version of that with the not consecutive added? Thank you.
Absolutely, Gary. We will send out a finalized version to all STAC members a couple of days after this meeting. And they will be posted on the STAC website on codot.gov.
Since our agenda was somewhat modified because of the extended break, I think I'll just do briefly the commissioner report. Commissioners met, and one of the things that was interesting is on the official meeting, there were many private citizens commenting on the use of asphalt versus concrete. It seems like, according to them, concrete is not as used as often as it could be, and that concrete has a longer lifetime than asphalt. Let's see here. The minutes of the commissioner meeting was very well done. And so you can read all of those kinds of things. I'm looking for where I was. Let's see. There was long discussion that they had also about PD 14. And let's see. We may have a Region 5 update on some of their projects. And they were really looking at a number of different projects over the life of the next few years. And there's a list of those projects in your packet. So unless somebody has a specific question about any of that stuff, I'd like to just keep moving forward. Any questions? Okay, moving on. TPR reports. Let's start, and we'll have those. Dr. Cog.
Yes, we did not have a meeting in August, did not have a board meeting in August, but we did have our annual award celebration. Over 500 folks, elected officials, sponsors, partners, and guests came to celebrate. Gave out Distinguished Service Award, which honors people who have given their time, talent, and skills to the region and its communities through the various programs and activities of Dr. Cog. We also gave our Metro Vision Awards, which recognize excellence, innovation, collaboration, and leadership. Among those winners include the Globeville Area Swansea Tolling Program, which recognized the efforts of CDOT and the Transportation Investment Office in the Northeast. Also, the Northeast Transportation Connects to provide toll credit each year to access the express lanes. And then finally, the John V. Christensen Memorial Award we awarded, which is the highest accolade for Dr. Cog, went to Karen Stewart. And she's just done an outstanding job of advocating both within our community, within her district, but also regionally. So we were excited to have that. So that's the update I'd like to give. And we want to congratulate all those winners. And thanks to everyone who helps make us better.
Central Front Range.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Construction is moving along. I want to thank CDOT for finally locating the last pole and putting it up for the chain-up station on the east or north side of Kenosha Pass. It looks like that's going to be set up. Fairplay is moving along. They're kind of in the hurry now with winter coming. And I want to add one thing about our earlier discussion on capacity and also safety. 2 weekends ago, 285 was closed for about 6 hours because of an accident close to the high school, but not there. But there isn't a good way around it. And then for Labor Day, we had the distinction. Our backup now has gone to 13.8 miles from County Road 43. And Vince, you know where that last light you see at 43 is as you come to Denver. And you also know where the King Soopers is in Aspen Park.
Right.
The backup went from that light all the way through to Aspen Park. And then every road that looked like it might be a way to get around that backup was also backed up. That was on Friday night. On Saturday morning, it wasn't quite as bad. It only made it to Safeway. So, we need to look at capacity, making changes so we can get people moving. Because if you look at greenhouse gas, having 13.8 miles of backup produces a lot more than people driving through. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Because they're all running their cars, even though they're in line. So, and I've had that somewhat. Let's see. Eastern TPR.
Yeah, we have our meeting next Monday, so we're kicking off our regional plan. Other than that, there has not been much new, just a continuation of the projects of construction. So not much new for Eastern. Thank you.
Okay. Grand Valley.
Yeah. Okay. So we had our safety symposium, Western Colorado Safety Symposium last week, and Rachel Peterson did a great job planning that. We had about 120 attendees from the Western Slope and a bunch of CDOT folks and FHWA folks also. So that was a really successful event. We had a board meeting last week and we adopted our UPWP. We've also are moving forward with a new transit contractor and adopted our Title VI plan and LEP plan. And then we also renewed our middle and high school student pass program. And this is something that we've done for quite a few years and has really increased our transit ridership is by offering free passes for middle and high school students. And we are reimbursed with TANF funding for those that are TANF eligible. So it's a little different than the state program, but a way to use some federal funds to help promote transit. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, so Gunnison Valley had its #1 meeting last week, and we had a lot of discussion, and we're moving forward. The biggest thing that we discussed and had difficulty with is the MMOF and its current position. And so we had some leftover, I'm trying to think of the word, leftover application money, not the money, but the application from our last go round, because we funded everybody that applied, but we were about 70,000 short. So one of the larger grantees contributed 70,000 from their award with the idea that they would get that back later when more money was available. And we appreciated the generosity of that particular unit. And so we voted on there to replace the money that was taken from her to from them to do all of the funding. So now we got that previous problem taken care of, but we still have the problem of many of the projects have overages and not enough money to complete the project. And that's because of the price increases and that kind of stuff. So we're trying to figure out how to handle those in terms of any new money coming in. Of course, the new money is a lot less than what we had before. And so we're having a special meeting on October 17th to go over the MMOF, just that in our planning process. One of the things that has been happening in our region, and specifically my county, is Highway 15 bridge over Blue Mesa. And they've gotten considerable work done. And so as of this holiday weekend, they've opened the bridge during the day. They had it open for the holiday weekend from 6:30 in the morning to 10:30 in the evening. And it's a one-way traffic with alternate directions after a while. And there's a pilot car there. Now, following the weekend, there's 2 bridges involved. There's the Middle Bridge, and then there's the Lake Fork Bridge. And both of those bridges will remain fully open between 6:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. daily, with a pilot car for operations and alternative directions. And so all of a sudden now we're getting able to get across the bridges. However, there are still some restrictions on the type of vehicles that are allowed to go over. And if the vehicle is too big, semi-truck, something like that, they have to take the other county road detour, which is County Road 26. But we're seeing good work and good process or progress on the bridge fix. So one of the interesting things on the bridge fix is they're putting all of these or bolting all these replacement plates over the existing bridge structure to give it more strength. And so they're bolting those, not welding, but bolting those to the existing bridge. One of the things they have to do, because these plates, these metal plates, start to weigh so much, they're going to have to skim some of the top coat of the roadway itself, some of the asphalt, and stuff off the bridge to make up the increase in weight. And so the bridge is still going, but it's going to be a little thinner there as we go along. I think as we proceed, we'll shake out a number of different things, both with Highway 50 bridge over Blue Mesa and our planning process. Meeting number 2 is in November, I think November 14th, and we'll just keep going. Okay, so where did I have my thing here? Intermountain.
Intermountain has not had a meeting since our last STAC meeting. We will continue to do the 2050 planning process in October. So thank you.
Okay, North Front Range.
Hello, Vince, and thank you. I lost my screen. There it is.
I can see you.
Yeah, sorry. At our last meeting, we the Planning Council had a presentation about the new FEMA-based level engineering floodplain thing that's going around. I would recommend before you get too deep into doing that as a county or a municipality, that you work with your county and evaluate that baseline engineering process. It is has some flaws in it, and it could really hurt your planning and growth perspective. So don't just blanketly accept it. Learn a little bit about it. Planning Council discussed a fare increase of 5% for our MPO Van Gogh. Van Gogh hasn't seen an increase since 2019. We're starting to see our numbers increase coming out of COVID. We're still not at our COVID numbers, but it's getting close, and we're starting to see people come back to that. What we discussed a little bit is it's funny that our Van Gogh was really probably the strongest, but then when we went to a lot of work from home and virtual work, that's hard to get it back, and people don't need it as often Tuesday, Thursday, not Monday through Friday. So interesting concept, but it's growing, and it's we're going to increase 5%. US 34 TMO named Go NoCo 34. We are looking for an executive director to lead that group. This really ties in well to the Link NoCo, or transit program that's going to connect Greeley to Loveland and the transit hub. So it's really important that we get this started, so when that transit system starts up, that we can start working with businesses in the communities to get that TMO ramped up. And that's all I have.
Thanks. Northwest.
Hey Vince, we have not had a meeting in August, but we have been doing some virtual voting. The final results are not out. They'll be due next week, but I'm sure it's going to hold. We are voting on the addition of the transit into our voting criteria. Unlike all of you, we have a heavy-sided muni county that has 7 municipalities within the county, and then we have other counties that only have 1 or 2. So our voting documents, our voting basically is weighted by county and then by how many municipalities they have. All of that is on our website, nwtpr.org. Anyway, long story short, it looks like the transit vote will be integrated into each county, and they will be able to assign who will have that vote. That's all the big exciting stuff here. Our next meeting is October 10th, where we will be doing our second planning meeting, and we will also be nominating new chair and vice chair for our TPR and reviewing our bylaws and finalizing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Pikes Peak.
Yes, so all of our projects are going along well. Lots of good work going on those projects. And then Next week, we're meeting as a council of governments. We are short funding on a couple of our big projects that are happening right now. And so we're going to be rearranging funding and to make sure we fully fund 2 projects at the top and then get the next 2 so that they have the money to go after the top 2 are done. That's it.
Okay, Pueblo area.
So our board met a couple weeks ago. We adopted our UPWP. We added the $8.8 million raise grant that Pueblo County got to our TIP. We got a good presentation from the Front Range Passenger Rail. The Medal of Honor Boulevard is about 12.5% complete, so they're working on just the roadway, and then they'll get the trail probably in a year or 2. And the MPO is working on a roundabout educational campaign. We're going to have several roundabouts being built in our community, and we want to just educate our residents on how to use roundabouts. That's it for us. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, San Luis Valley.
Yeah, our TPR met on August 22nd, and along with that, we had a couple of county meetings that day. We appreciate the good attendance in person by CDOT staff, and I think Julie is scheduled to give an update on construction in our area later on, so I won't go into any of that. Thanks.
Okay, let's see. South Central.
Okay, the last TPR meeting we had was in July. Our next meeting is October 24th. We have our county planning meeting set for September 25th in Trinidad. And we're also still working with lobbyists to add an additional TPR instead of consolidating South Central and Southeast. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Southwest.
I believe there is a project update included in the STAC packet for our region, so I won't go into that. We did receive some unspent ARPA funds back from a member municipality. So at our last meeting, we reallocated these funds to several members and projects to make sure that they do get used. At our next meeting on October 10th, we will be receiving some suggested projects to update our long-range planning. And then we will also be discussing and potentially adopting a timeline and scoring criteria for the next round of MMOF funding. And that is where we are.
Okay, Upper Front Range.
Thanks, Vince. We have a meeting immediately after this. Several CDOT folks are coming to that, and that's why they're jumping off like flies. But wanted to make it to everybody's attention that our transportation commissioner that serves our area up here as well as the North Front Range, Jim Kelly, announced his retirement in October. So we're searching out replacements. Have had a couple interested people meet with Jim on that, asking him questions on what it would entail to see if they want to put their application forth for that. But working on construction projects, and we'll have more after today's meeting. So that's it.
Okay, Southern Ute. Southern Ute. Ute Mountain. FHWA. FTA. Have I missed anybody? Okay, any questions, comments, random thoughts? Okay, legislative report.
Mr. Chair, we're not having a legislative report this month.
We aren't.
Emily is on annual leave, and Jamie doesn't have anything for this month.
Okay, Region 5.
Hey, good morning, Vince.
Hey, Tony.
Aaron, are you going to pull up that slide deck, or should I? You are. Yeah, so the regions have been providing some project updates, regional updates at these meetings. And it's our turn. So we thought it would be timely to talk about our accomplishments in delivering projects on our 10-year strategic plan, given that we're entering into that 2050 long-range transportation plan update process. So I'm going to go through some slides. But before I do that, I wanted to just remind everyone who the region is. We're located in the southwest part of the state. It's the southwest and south central part of the state. We're comprised of 15 counties and our 2 Indian tribal nations. We have 3 transportation planning regions, the San Luis Valley, the Southwest, and then we share the Gunnison Valley with Region 3. Next slide. A little bit more about the region. We have 370 full-time employees. We operate and maintain about 3,600 lane miles of the state highway. We have 3.6% of the state's population, so pretty rural. We have 14 mountain passes over 8,000 feet, 228 bridges, and 2 rest areas, one on the west side and one on the east side of Wolf Creek Pass. So the Sleeping Ute rest area by Cortez, and the one over by South Fork as well, Shock Creek. And then we have 5 scenic byways in the region. So we do a lot of communication and coordination with those scenic byway committees. We're the only region without an interstate. So our transportation backbones are U.S. highways, but not interstates. We have 160 going east to west, 550 going north to south. US 491 traverses kind of the western edge of our region. And then we have centrally located US 50, which often serves as an alternative route if I-70 is shut down. And given that we don't have an interstate and we only have about 3.6% of the state's population, we typically receive a lower proportion of the state's transportation budget. And this requires the region to try to do more with less. But we also aggressively go after federal grants to supplement our regional budgets. And then we try to fine tune the planning and prioritization of our projects with our planning stakeholders so that we're focusing on the areas of the greatest need first and trying to comply with our performance objectives and the performance measures outlined in PD 14. Next. Yeah, so next. So an example of this fine-tuning of that prioritization process is demonstrated by the methodology for selecting the Region 5 10-year strategic plan projects. So at the end of the development of the last regional transportation plans for each of our 3 TPRs, we moved into a facilitated conversation to prioritize and rank each of the projects in the long-range plan in order of agreed upon priority. And then the 3 TPR chairs met, and we conducted an overall regional prioritization of all the projects. And then we fiscally constrained those top tier priorities to the projected revenues that would come through legislative proposals. So all the top priorities from the RTPs went into our 10-year strategic plan. Next. So within the 10-year strategic plan, Region 5 was allocated $403 million of strategic funding. We coupled that with about $290 million of other funds to fully deliver or plan to deliver 46 projects in total in that 10-year plan document. So 23 projects in the first half of the 10-year plan and 23 in that second later half, which spans fiscal years 27 through 2032. And as of right now, we have 9 projects that are completed and 3 that are currently in construction. And I'm just going to go through real quick those projects as a highlight of moving forward with the updating of the 10-year plan that will happen at the end of 2025. So that next slide is the first project I wanted to mention, and this is the US 160 Toyoak Passing Lanes project. This project also received a Tiger grant to help us complete the funding package, and it provided passing lanes and a reconstructed roadway from the city of Cortez down to the Ute Mountain Ute tribal boundary. And both the county, Montezuma County, and the tribe had been asking us for these passing lanes to address some congestion and safety issues at this location where we'd had a couple fatalities. for a few planning cycles. So this money actually allowed us to deliver this highly important project for the southwest part of the state. Next is the State Highway 141 rural road surface treatment projects. We have two of them. This is the first one. And that was from Slick Rock to Natarita, and then from Natarita east on 145 to the town of Redville. So very rural parts of Colorado. And we hadn't touched these roads in 30 years. And this gave us a one-time opportunity to really bring these roads back up to a drivable condition. And they had fallen outside of our surface treatment model's ability to include funding. So this is probably the only opportunity that we would have had to pave these roadways. The next one is another project in this very remote part of Colorado, this time on 141 north of Natarita. And it had some of the lowest drivability life in the state. We were able to do an overlay on this particular road section up towards the Region 3 boundary and get that back into a drivable condition. And that was completed in 2021. The next is a very similar project, and you'll see a trend here that we completed a lot of our paving projects in this first round because they were the kind of the most needed improvements at the initial stage of the 10-year plan. We completed widening and a surface treatment project on State Highway 17 north of Alamosa all the way to the US 285 junction. The shoulders in this section of road were incredibly steep, and anytime someone departed the travel lane, they would basically roll their car, and we'd had a number of fatalities on this section. So this allowed us to get 10-foot shoulders and then reconstruct the road pavement section. And we hadn't been able to touch this road again in 20 years, and we were able to complete that project in 2021 as well. And the next project was a little bit atypical in the 10-year plan in that we partnered with Region 3 on this rural road paving project on State Highway 149. It extended from Creed past Lake City, and this area gets a ton of tourist traffic in the summer. And so we coupled our 10-year plan funds to deliver a single project in this kind of heavily tourist traveled section and brought it up from low drivability life to a high drivability life, and it was completed in 2022. The next project is US 160 between New Mexico and Aztec Creek. These are kind of local mile markers in Region 5. Basically a project in the Ute Mountain Ute Reservation that goes to the Four Corners area. We corrected some safety deficiencies in the road segment, and then we enhanced shoulders. We got an additional passing lane through this area, so we increased the mobility. And then we reconstructed the pavement, which was failing through this section. This is a unique project in that we partnered with the New Mexico DOT. They gave us money to pave a section of their highway that had been falling apart, and they hadn't been able to get to in 20 or 30 years as well. So they donated some money to us. We paid our contractor to pave their section of road. It required a lot of coordination with both the Ute Mountain Ute Reservation, and then in the New Mexico side, we coordinated a lot with the Navajo Nation because the highway section falls entirely within their lands. So a lot of coordination on that project. The next project is a small $2 million paving job on State Highway 370 between 15 and US 285 in San Luis Valley. This was coupled with a much larger surface treatment project that was planned with our base surface treatment dollars. And it allowed us to kind of couple the projects together because they're adjacent to each other. And we got more bang for our buck by sharing mobilization costs and traffic control costs so that we were able to pave the entire section of this small rural highway, State Highway 370. And then next was another combo project with Region 3. We paved State Highway 114 this past year, and it spanned both regions. So it went northeast of the town of Saguache all the way into the Region 3 boundary area. We did just focused on the low drivability life sections of this roadway, and then we did some spot shoulder widening to address some safety issues along this highway section. The next project is pretty interesting. I think we've provided an update to the staff on this project before, but in 2021, we began working on replacing culverts that carry McCabe Creek through downtown Pagosa Springs. McCabe Creek outlets in the San Juan River, right in the heart of Pagosa Springs. And at some point in the distant past, a commercial building was built over the southern half of two very large metal pipes. Not sure exactly when or why that decision was made, but it was. And then those pipes under the building separated at some point and started causing some subsurface destabilization issues. We ended up having to buy that property, demo the building. The strategic funds allowed the region to complete the funding package. We've been struggling to fund this particular project. And replace the pipes with these 3 concrete box culverts that you can see, and then restore that creek channel down to the San Juan River, kind of to its historic condition. Given its central location in the community of Pagosa Springs and no alternative routes through town, it took 2 years to complete because we had to maintain traffic at all times during construction. So a lot of heartburn and heartache for the town of Pagosa Springs, but it was an essential project to add some resiliency to that highway section. The next project is a current project, and we have 3 that are currently being constructed and planned for completion in the next month or 2. And this is the reconstruction of the US 50 and 285 intersection in Poncha Springs. We're also coupling that with a rural road paving project on US 50 going west. And we hope to have that project completed in October or November this year. And then interesting project. It's the next project. It's called the, next slide, please. Yeah, the Pacachupuk South and Billy Creek project. It's a safety project on US 550 north of Ridgeway. And then there's a state park entrance called Pacachupuk. We're rearranging some passing lanes through this section to address some safety issues that are inherent with the current passing lane layout. And then we're constructing a wildlife underpass at the Billy Creek Wildlife Area that's managed by CPW. 60% of the accidents on this stretch of 550 are wildlife vehicle collisions, and we hope that the addition of the underpass and deer fencing will lower that accident rate by 90%. And then the last project that's currently under construction is the connection project that was mentioned earlier. We got a $12 million Fast Lanes grant to help complete the funding package. This is a $100 million project. We're realigning the current, or it's no longer current, but the historic grade down into Durango, which had very steep and curvy grades that were dangerous in the winter months. We're moving that connection point to a grade separated interchange on the eastern edge of the city limits. We're also building 4 wildlife crossing structures because 50% of the accidents were wildlife vehicle collisions. A lot of deer fencing. This picture on the slide shows the ribbon cutting ceremony that was done for the new alignment of 550 down to 160. And we hope to have that project completed within the next month or so. And that's it. We're we're designing the other projects that are in that first tranche of the 10-year plan document. And we're going out to advertisement with 4 of those projects in the next month. So those should be completed by next year. That'll free up a lot of capacity when we're working with our transportation planning regions to update the long-range plan and then identify new priorities to backfill projects in the 10-year plan document. That's all I had. Thank you.
So one of the things I noticed early on is you got a lot of straight roads there.
Yeah, I think we got a good combination of a lot of straight roads and a lot of curvy roads. I don't know if you've ever driven over Red Mountain Pass, but I don't think there's not a straight line in that roadway.
That's true.
Yeah.
And it's sort of steep on one side.
It's a little dangerous. Yeah.
Other questions, comments? It looks like you got a lot of work done and a lot of work to do.
Yeah, a lot of paving. We had been falling behind on several roadways, and we were able to use the 10-year plan money to get a lot of paving done, which we were really thankful for.
Okay, well, it's been kind of an interesting meeting. Little different, a little strange. And so we're sorry about the CDOT employees who got killed. We have to remember that safety needs to be our number one priority. So next meeting, October 3rd, in person. And we're going to elect a new chairman and a new vice chair. So that means that's going to be my last meeting as chair. But I plan to continue the meetings because I'm still chair of the Gunnison Valley Transportation Planning Region, so I'm still going to be a member of STAC. And so we're going to be electing a new chair and a new vice chair. And so you need to be prepared. One of the things with the in-person meeting, it allows us to do voting and counting and have verification of the new officers. And the new officers will take position probably right after the first couple of things. We're going to have our election and then we'll just pass the gavel. Questions or comments? Well, I'm impressed that we didn't go till 2 o'clock because of our discussion of PD 14. Any other things to be brought before the STAC? Hearing none, then I'll consider the meeting adjourned. Thanks, guys. We'll see you in October.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vince.